Hi, David. We arrived to a heavy media and police presence here outside of the Studio City home of rapper Mac Miller. And authorities confirm here a death investigation.
Malcolm James McCormick, better known as Mac Miller. He was born January 19th, 1992 in Point Breeze, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Sadly passed away from an accidental overdose on September 7th, 2018. His parents are Mark and Karen McCormick. He was raised Jewish. I don't think that picture... Okay, he was raised Jewish. And oh yeah, silly me, I completely forgot this one. He also made music.
Wanna get a mansion, a jacuzzi, a theater to watch my movie. No matter where life takes me, find me with a smile. Party on Fifth Ave. Devil with a pitchfork, just a little taste. Ashamed at my track. I thought I have it. You were everything I just need. Once a day I rise. Once a day I fall asleep with you. Once a day I try, but I can't find a single.
Not to add a bit of background to this video, this isn't a documentary on Mac's life. I suggest going on your own time and watching some of the documentaries on YouTube. But today I will just be giving my opinions on Mac's projects, and it's not necessarily me saying this is good and this is bad and fuck you, my opinion's right. But it's just my honest thoughts and opinions, and I hope you can appreciate that, maybe just like a little bit. Alright, time for the disclaimer. I won't be reviewing any of Mac's self-release mixtapes. This video will cover strictly the albums and mixtapes of Mac Miller released with a record label. Now, the main thing I want to point out is that I am no professional. I'm not a musician. I can barely tell the difference between bass and drums. Alright, I swear I'm not that dumb, but I hope you get the fucking point. I'm just giving my thoughts about these projects, and I try to give more of an abstract way of thinking about these projects, so fuck you. This is my video. I'm gonna say what I want. Now then, on with the video.
Kool-Aid and frozen pizza. It's the work of art. I ain't talking Mona Lisa. Dream of rocking crowds.
What a great way to describe this album, said by Mac himself. Now then, this is no masterpiece by any means, but that doesn't mean that some of these songs don't deserve to be on your playlist. I like to consider this mixtape more fun rather than good, but I mean, what am I to say? I'm not a musician. But to make an analogy to how I feel about this mixtape, it feels like every song is a little sweet treat, and I'm not getting too much to the point where I'm getting sick of it. It's just the right amount of sweet treats. But sweet treats can lack variety and flavor. This mixtape is like I completely skipped mother's dinner and immediately ate grandma's dessert. Fuck, that came out weird. Okay, fuck me, enough of the food analogies. I think this mixtape lacks variety, depth, lyricism, and honestly, the list goes on, but of course, I don't see that as the point of this mixtape. I think the biggest thing about this mixtape is its charm. K.I.D.S just has this fucking charm that is so hard to turn down. Anyways, to go a little more into how Mac was in his life during the time of this being released, Mac has just graduated high school and he's excited, his hard work has been paying off, and he's jumping his career to superstardom. And most of all, he's having fun while doing all of it. And you can hear that in his music. I think this mixtape can really show how all of us want to be on the inside, working hard and having fun, plain and simple. Especially with lyrics like,
oh yeah, this life is good, don't let it all go to waste.
So simple, maybe a bit too simple for some people, but so true nonetheless. But I don't see this mixtape as all sunshine and rainbows. Some people can see this mixtape as just a dumb kid speaking his mind with confidence and being arrogant at the core. For example, with lyrics like,
motherfucker, I feel like the hardest working kid in America playing with the...
I never met a true Mac Miller hater, but I can understand why people wouldn't like him, at least at this time in his life. And I do think this kind of cockiness came back to bite Mac in the ass with the infamous Blue Slide Park, which we'll get into in a bit. The last thing I want to mention is that the lifestyle that Mac illustrates in this mixtape can be just straight up fun, but straight up dangerous. With a bar like,
when I pass in the street, zoom by, don't fasten my seatbelt.
Looking at this lyric figuratively, as a kid, you feel like an absolute fucking badass not wearing a seatbelt in the car. And I see this absolute badass feeling translating to how Mac feels about his life at that moment, and you can hear it in his music. But this begs the question, what happens when the car crashes? Overall, this mixtape was just Mac being Mac at the time, no bullshit, which, I mean, you gotta respect at least a little. I think the point of this mixtape is to just have fun and a good time and live in the moment and not give a fuck. At the end of the day, the mixtape is ridiculously fun and 100% worth a listen. Whether you want to sit down and listen to it and analyze every little thing, I'll tell you right now, you're not going to get a whole lot out of doing that, or just listen to it while you're chilling with your friends. That is what I suggest. This mixtape streams fun, and it's not meant to be sophisticated and mature. For what the mixtape is, I give it a solid 7 out of 10. Compared to what's coming next, this mixtape really isn't very good, at least to me. And I originally had this rating at 6 out of 10, but over time I felt that a 7 out of 10 was necessary, just because of how well the frattiness and corniness was done. If you were to only listen to one song off this mixtape, I would highly suggest The Spins. It doesn't cover everything I said in my overall opinion about the mixtape, but the song is just pure fun, and you gotta love it for that. Now on to the next album or mixtape, whatever the fuck it is.
Kids got me buzzing like a fucking hornet. Say I got next, tell them that I got now. It's all Disney, boy. My family.
Okay, this mixtape is, well, pretty simple, which doesn't make it bad by any means, but I just feel like Best Day Ever is an unnecessary sequel to K.I.D.S. I can see pretty much all these songs being on K.I.D.S, and I wouldn't think anything sounded out of place. Which again isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's a bland and simple thing. In fact, I feel as if this mixtape is so similar to K.I.D.S that I could switch out my analogy of K.I.D.S for Best Day Ever and it would make a 100% sense. Pretty much everything's the same, fun, arrogant, driving through without the seatbelt on. This mixtape as a whole, similar to K.I.D.S of course, just lacks lyricism and depth. But I didn't mention how Max spoke about women on K.I.D.S because you could just kind of assume how he would speak about women on K.I.D.S. Just super immature and my dick, your mouth, no discussion type beat. But I bring this up now because I think that Wear My Hat shows at least a little bit of maturity in talking about women. Of course, he has a few bars sexualizing the woman that he is rapping about. Fuck. But as a whole, I see some change in how Mac talks about women, and maybe, just maybe, this foreshadowed the divine feminine, the tiniest bit. Which of course, we'll get into later. Now, one last thing I want to get into before the main part of how I feel about this mixtape is a slight show and deeper perspective from Mac. And life ain't easy, he says.
From the outside looking in, it seems that I'm fine, but they don't know shit about the everyday grind.
I did say only a little bit of perspective, right? Of course, that line compared to what's to come next in this video really isn't that good, but it was worth noting. Oh yeah, and forgot to mention this questionable yet oddly likable funky rap song, Play Your Cards.
Came up to me and asked my name. I said it's Funky Mac. I don't play no games. If you wanna come home with me tonight, you better play your cards.
Now then, the main thing I get from this album, besides it being so ridiculously similar to K.I.D.S, which again isn't a bad thing, I don't know how many times I feel like I have to fucking say that, is that what goes up must come down. And let me explain. Best Day Ever came out about 7 months after K.I.D.S. 7 months, and Mac is still doing the same things and writing similar music. And the overall feelings about the music he is writing and what he is doing is good. Just good, maybe even great. But it's humanly impossible to keep up with the lifestyle Mac illustrates in both Best Day Ever and K.I.D.S, which, as we know now, he obviously didn't keep up with. Rest in peace. But going through these albums in order, it becomes evident that these things are too good to stay like this. While this was seemingly Mac's highest point of his well-being in terms of having fun and enjoying life, this is what also led him to his downfall. That shouldn't have anything to do with how quote-unquote good the music is, but it does have something to do with how I feel about the music. So as a whole, I give this mixtape a 6 out of 10, and as I said with K.I.D.S, I still rock lots of these songs to this day, and I'm just giving my opinion. If you were going to listen to one song off this mixtape, I would highly suggest I'll Be There. It's a song about Mac's mom, and it's just super wholesome, and I think it's worth a fucking listen.
I think I see where it's going, this one here. Hey, been around the world and back, yeah, I did that. Still kick raps and cars and packs, so where my kids at?
Man, where do I start with this album? Well, this was Mac Miller's first studio release album, and I gotta say, I am not the biggest fan of this. I mean...
As a rapper, I'm nutting in her mouth, you tongue kissing her after.
What the fuck? Anyways, I'm gonna say it. I see Blue Slide Park as a far far cry from K.I.D.S. Of course, there were some things done differently, but it just didn't have a charm like K.I.D.S. and best they ever had, at least to me. And there were some questionable lyrics that I'll get into a bit, but back to K.I.D.S. K.I.D.S. just had this fucking charm, and all of the arrogance and immaturity of talking about women and the overall rap vibe was the whole charm of K.I.D.S. It sounded so natural, and just at the end of the day, it was fun, and it wasn't like you're shoving candy down your throat. But Blue Slide Park just didn't have that same charm, nor a charm that really resonated with me at all. And I find this album feeling a little forced. And this might be because I'm listening to these albums in order, and it might just be getting repetitive for me, and that's just how I feel about this album. I mean, at this point, it just feels like I'm forcing candy down my mouth, and I'm getting sick of it. And anything else that seems to be done differently with this album just doesn't seem done well enough in order for the album to have a different charm, or just for me to perceive the album differently. For example, Missed Calls, which I think is one of the better songs on the album, was obviously about a strained relationship with someone. And honestly, I really like that song. Not that I can necessarily relate to everything he's saying, but I like the song. But as much as I like that song, it doesn't make me see the whole album differently as a whole. Not to mention, one of the most popular songs on Blue Slide Park is Party on 5th Ave, which, don't get me wrong, it's a fun song, but in my opinion, the song just sounds very immature. And I'm not just saying he's still doing the my dick, your mouth, no discussion type of thing, but I just think the song in general sounds immature. It just seems like Mac isn't fulfilling his potential at this time, especially with the music experience he's had up to this point, and Blue Slide Park being the first studio album ever released by him. Not to mention, I feel the same way about Frick Park Market, which is another popular yet fun song on the album. Lastly, before I give my overall grade for this album, there are a few lyrics I just want to touch on.
Hey, don't even know what's in my head anymore though. Torso, I ain't normal, I'm clinically insane. I guess it's the result of drugs that enter in my brain all of a sudden.
Now, please don't quote me on this, okay? But part of Mac's downfall with addiction and such was the reaction to this album. But I think we can see glimpses of Mac's future downfalls with addiction with these two lyrics before any reactions. Now, I'm a parasocial Mac Miller fan. I didn't fucking know the guy. He didn't fucking know me. But it seems like Mac experienced repercussions for living this lifestyle he illustrated so much in these first 3 projects. How I see these lyrics is that Mac is just at a point where he gets thoughts in his head that he doesn't feel like he's putting there, and they could be intrusive and such, which could make him feel insane. Which, if I had to guess, is a repercussion for doing drugs. At least doing drugs often. Now then, I give this album a fat 3 out of 10. Don't worry, that's my lowest grade of the video. As I said before, I still listen to some of these songs off the album, but the album as a whole doesn't really impress me at all or gives me a charm like K.I.D.S had. Lastly, if I were to suggest you one song off this album, it would be Missed Calls. It may not be the funnest song on the album, but I just enjoy the overall sound and the lyrics of this song, and I think you would too. Oh, and I'd never, ever do a Blue Slide Park review without mentioning the infamous Pitchfork review.
Love me as I have loved you.
I got a pocket full of posies, some devil with a pitchfork, he talking like he know me.
Holy shit, where do I fucking start with this mixtape, dude? To put it simply, I really fucking like this mixtape. It's not perfect, and we still see reminiscence of arrogance and immaturity, but, and that's a big but, this mixtape as a whole was so much more mature overall. And I don't just mean mature in his lyrics and what he's talking about, but the overall music sounds more mature. Of course, there are some songs like Ignorant. Speaking of that song, I want to say I think that name just fits perfectly. But it feels like Mac just said at the time, fuck it, I'm gonna embrace what they say about me. But this album starts off with some French or Russian or something girls speaking, and the transition from the beginning to Desperado is simply immaculate. This is the stuff I fucking love. Seriously, just take a minute and listen to the beginning of Macadelic and feel the transition between the 2 first tracks. Then it goes into Loud, which is a ridiculously fun song and has such a nice charm to it that I don't give a fuck what he is saying at that point. There were quite a few songs I didn't care for too much, but there were plenty of songs that I was a fan of. Anyways, I'll now state the obvious. This was the first music release after the absolute metaphorical car crash of Blue Slide Park. And obviously Mac has paid attention to what critics have said.
Some devil with a pitchfork, he talking like he know me.
And there was an interesting lyric that went,
and now these writers taking shots without a night gun. But I don't fight though, figure it's a typo. Seems we in some shit now.
Now, I don't know exactly what Mac meant by this specific lyric, but hey, maybe you can come up with your own interpretation of this lyric. But Mac also said,
Wonder who really give a fuck what I have to say. Those are people to which I dedicate this rap.
which I like all these bars, but it's obvious that Mac cared about what people thought about his music. Honestly, I think I like Blue Slide Park just a little bit better now. If he were to never release that, he were to never get a 1 out of 10 on Pitchfork, and he, therefore, would have never made music exactly how it has been made after that. Okay, I'm convinced. 10 out of 10 for Blue Slide Park. Okay, jokes aside, there are some songs that were just kind of depressing. Of course, this mixtape as a whole isn't depressing, but a lot of parts in the question just really got me thinking about life, relating to what Mac was saying. But I feel like the song also just showed the room that Mac has for improvement in his personal life and in his music. But now I want to talk about the relatability of this mixtape. But to talk about that, it's only right I talk about the relatability of Mac's 3 previous projects. Well, there's not much to talk about. And of course, it's different for everyone, but for me, there wasn't much to relate to, which created this superficial feeling for these first 3 projects. But in Macadelic, I feel as if there were many more instances where you could relate to what Mac was saying. Just as an example,
Designer brands cover up my insecurities.
of course I'm not able to afford Louis Vuitton or Gucci, but I feel like I can relate to this specific bar on a lower level, and maybe you can too. But this mixtape as a whole has a lot more relatability to it, which I think helps take it to a level that Blue Slide Park, Best Day Ever, and K.I.D.S couldn't even touch. Now yes, I don't find myself relating to lots of the drug-induced lyrics within this mixtape, but I still do think the relatability overall is better than the first 3 projects. Now I want to touch on the woman talk with this mixtape. In the morning after, of course it starts off with a super immature lyric about a tongue and a pussy, whatever the fuck that is, but this time it feels different. It doesn't feel like the divine feminine where even the sex talk is done in a beautiful way, but it just feels more mature than the past 3 projects. And not to mention that's not the whole song, it's not the my dick, yo mouth, no discussion feeling the whole time. It feels more mature and not something I would play in front of my mother, but something I would play in front of my mother after muting the first 10 seconds. Anyways, as a whole, this mixtape had some flashes back to the K.I.D.S days, but it has a completely different charm, which I think is the most important part in an album, mixtape, or whatever. So I'm gonna give Macadelic a good 8 out of 10. Now then, if you were to listen to one song off this mixtape, I would highly suggest Desperado. Just listen to it. Alright, on to the next album thing. Let's go.
But me, I'm still trapped inside my head. It kind of feel like
Okay, whoa. Wait a minute. I just want to note that months after writing the script, I found myself listening to this mixtape less and less. And maybe I was so caught up in wanting something different from Mac and I got it. That could be why I like this mixtape so much. But nonetheless, I still do like this mixtape, but it didn't hold up too well for me. Besides Desperado, I do think that's the best song off this mixtape. But now with all that said and done, I'd probably give this mixtape a 7 out of 10. I know it seems a bit weird because I'm talking so highly about this mixtape and I'm giving it the same score as K.I.D.S, which I didn't really seem to talk that highly of. But looking back at this now, it kind of feels like during this Macadelic era that Mac was just trying to find his groove and what type of music he wanted to make. So inevitably, I think that kind of made for more experimental music, which might have sounded good on the first listen. But over time, it kind of just became alright for me. So whatever. Yeah, that's my opinion. Okay. Oh, fuck.
Still read bad more. Tripping out, looking at a bunch of Google Map stars. Shit, they got an app for that.
But me, I'm still trapped inside my head. It kind of feel like it's a purgatory.
To start off, I think this... Also, I just want to say I'm really, I don't know if I'm sick, but, my voice sounds weird. Whatever. To start off, I think this album is probably going to be the most objective-based review so far. In all my other reviews, I know people will disagree, some a little and some a lot, but you can see where I'm coming from. At least I hope so. But with this album, it feels harder to get a full grasp of my opinion because it's so vastly different from Mac's projects up to this point. But just for it being different, I already fucking like it. Anyways, to my understanding, this album is pretty experimental, and I know that Mac took over a lot of production on this album. For example, of songs like Euphoria and SDS. I'm not a music producer, master, or whatever the fuck they're called, so I don't know on a technical level what makes something experimental or not, but it flat out sounds experimental to me. It doesn't sound like things I hear in everyday rap music, so I'm just gonna fly with it. Anyways, I'll get into a deeper opinion on the songs I mentioned earlier later, but I don't know exactly how to feel about this album. Some parts are super unfiltered and so different from Mac's early projects, and sometimes, especially in the bonus tracks, I feel like I'm back in Blue Slide Park. But at the end of the day, no matter how I look at this album, every song is so different from all his past projects, which quite honestly I love and is something I crave. If I put myself in 2013 and got this album, I would definitely be a bit surprised and maybe even confused, but I believe I would love it because Mac kinda has been following this recipe to his projects up to this point, besides Macadelic for the most part. And now at this point, he's trying to be a revolutionary to his music and music in general.
All your songs are 16s in the hook. We here to reinvent music. It's time for the revolution.
Although with a lot of these songs, it feels more like he's a reformer rather than a revolutionary. But following this path makes me think of this lyric.
Hating those abstract ideas for sure will get you laid.
Obviously, in the situation I'm putting this lyric, I'm not thinking of Mac getting physically laid, but in a metaphorical way. As in getting laid as people enjoying his music, enjoying his living in the moment fratty style that was composed so well in K.I.D.S. Mac's path of trying to improve his music by experimenting isn't necessarily going to make a lot of people happy. But personally, I fuck with it. Now, I want to get into some more in-depth opinions I have about certain songs that have grabbed my attention. First is The Star Room, which was the song that played in the intro. The song feels like a repercussion for Mac's lifestyle that he enjoyed and illustrated so much in K.I.D.S. and Best Day Ever in Blue Slide Park, of course. I think this is one of the most down-to-earth, raw emotion songs that Mac has made up to this point. In K.I.D.S, Best Day Ever, and Blue Slide Park were also raw emotions, but I think there's something about these darker emotions that just cause not necessarily better music, because this is all subjective at the end of the day, but more interesting music at the very least. More interesting wordplay and lyrics, and most of all, more depth. Not to mention the simple yet hard-hitting lyric.
3 years ago to now, it's just not the same. I'm looking out.
Next, I want to talk about SDS a little. This song feels super experimental, which I believe it is, and I oddly like it. It's not something I chill to while hanging out with my friends, but it's different. And just being different, at least I think, is valuable enough by itself to be mentioned, especially considering Mac's discography up to this point. Also, Bird Call I found super unfiltered. Not in the way the Star Room was unfiltered, but more in a way he focused more on a different part of his mind. And this part of his mind just has no fucking filter whatsoever. I mean, listen to this fucking lyric.
Punch a fan if you get a fucking word wrong, wavy.
Also, a song that I really liked off this album was I Am Who I Am. Killing Time, whatever the fuck it's called. This song feels so self-aware and it's super questioning. I found myself really enjoying this song, and it takes me back a little to Mac's earlier projects, especially with Nikki Rhonda talking about how it's a gift to be alive and no earthly vehicle can handle this ride. But it's done in a way like, why doesn't it feel like it? And I've got to mention Red Dot Music. First off, I fucking love Action Bronson in this song. I think he fucking killed it. And of a fucking course, I liked Mac in this song as well. But at the end of the song, Loaded Lux says all these rhymes that seem to be shoving Mac's insecurities in his face.
You a bully's best day ever. With them Nikes on your feet, coming through Blue Slide Park. I'm gonna rob this chump. Wanna party on Fifth Ave like he Donald Trump. Nigga, give me that shit. I liked you better when you was Easy Mac with the cheesy raps. Who the fuck is Mac Miller?
This makes me feel like Mac was at a time in his life where he didn't really know himself, obviously from Macadelic, and he's trying to find himself through his music, and I think insecurities come along the way. There's also no way I can't mention Remember, the saddest song on this album, without a doubt. I knew about the whole thing with Mac creating his own label after one of his friends passed, but I didn't really see how much it meant to him until I heard this song. Lastly, I would like to touch up on Euphoria. I don't find the actual music anything special. In fact, I think this song can require special taste to really enjoy from a music standpoint. However, I really do like the clever wordplay with the title of the song. Someone giving Mac Euphoria, hence Euphoria. But with everything I've said, I like the direction Mac was taking at the time. Just experimenting and trying to make better music at the end of the day. All said and done, this album is different, experimental, and fun at some points to say the least. I enjoyed this album a lot, but I really think I liked Macadelic better. Maybe just a little bit better, but better nonetheless. But as I said earlier, I think this is one of the most subjective albums that has come from Mac Miller. So I'll give this a high 7 out of 10. Yeah, just kidding. After a few months after writing this whole script and having a bit more time with these projects, I definitely like watching movies with the sound off better than Macadelic. And the thing with Macadelic was that there was definitely experimentation within the mixtape, but for me it lost its charm over time. But for watching movies, it kind of felt like the opposite. At first I was like, I don't really fully know about this, I don't know. But over time of watching movies, I listened to it more and more, and it grew on me more and more. So anyways, let's change that grade real quick. There we go. That's better. Oh yeah, and of course, how could I fucking forget? If you're going to listen to one song off this album, I would suggest I Am Who Am, Killing Time. I think it has a good mix between questioning life, versatility, and experimentation.
Yeah.
Yup, get fucked, kids. This is going to be a part 1. Part 2 will be released in 2 days from the day of this video being released. And, yeah, I hope you end up watching it. Yeah, okay.